The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents a conversation with Johnny Angel. Hey everybody, welcome to another Atheist Debates kind of interview video with another one of my friends who's also somebody who participates with the Atheist Community of Austin on the shows. Johnny, thank you for showing up.
Thanks for having me.
Full disclosure, yes, the quarantine is not quite over, but he's actually living with me for the interim until this is over. So we've been having conversations, doing stuff. Those of you who aren't familiar with him, he just did his first episode of the Atheist Experience the other day. And I thought it'd be good to sit down and talk about a little bit about his past, how he got involved with the community and other stuff. For those who don't know, I suspect that Johnny Angel is a pseudonym.
It is.
Yeah. And as you mentioned on other shows, because you've done Truth Wanted and Vanguard and nonprofits,
Godless Bitches,
yeah.
Been on the crew for some time now.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, there were other people who noticed you're an attorney. And so we're going to do another video after this discussion talking about the law and the burden of proof and things like that, because lots of interesting topics. But tell us a little bit about your background with regard to religious stuff. How religious were you? What was it like? When did you find your way out? Did you find your way out? Were you always an atheist?
No, I grew up in a Catholic house. My father is a atheist, I guess you would say. My mother was always very Catholic. I think she said that she wanted to be a nun, but she didn't for some reason. So I grew up going to Catholic school, Catholic high school, Catholic college. We used to go to church every Sunday. We would go to the cemetery, I think, every weekend to take care of the dead.
Now, what's that involve, going to the cemetery to take care of the dead?
We bring a watering can, we would fill it up with water, and we would wash the gravestones, pick the weeds, and say a prayer over the deceased. This included people that I knew, like my grandpa, great-grandma, not my great-grandpa, he was a cool jazz musician, but my mother's college roommate who had a miscarriage, and there was a little tiny grave somewhere. I think it was every Sunday.
And for curiosity's sake, when they say taking care of the dead, do they think they're taking care of the dead, or are they taking care of a gravesite for the living? Because the dead aren't there, are they?
No. That's a really good question. I think it was my mother's way of honoring the dead, the memories of the dead, and maybe giving them peace wherever they were. I don't know if it was entirely thought out, but I know my mother experiences a lot of peace inside of graveyards. She actually lived next to a graveyard at one point. I don't know if it was on purpose, but yeah, not a goth person in any way,
right.
But very death-centered, but not in a negative way. But
I know two people in this house that aren't you who would love to live next to a cemetery. I just would.
Yeah, and it didn't bother me at the time. I remember just being bored, but it was nice being outside, and my mind would wander. And maybe that's why I liked Night of the Living Dead so much when I was older, right? But so I went to church, Catholic school. I don't want to say that I was the kid that asked the tough questions all the time. And I mentioned this on the show. I think I might have been on autopilot a lot of it, but then every so often something would come up. And I would ask those questions like, well, what if this is all just a made-up story? What if the apostles or the writers of the Gospels or whatever, what if they had something they were trying to sell people? What if they knew that they could be somebody? And the answers from the teachers, and sometimes when the priest would come in to answer those questions, would be like, okay, I guess that's a good answer. They were never good answers now that I think back on it. I remember thinking, I'm not so sure about that. And then I was about 11 or 12, and we had a TV station. I'm from the upper Midwest. And there was a TV station up there that had a guy, Father James Eastep, or Reverend James Eastep, something like that. And he had these intense graphs and charts of the end days. And if you want to convince me of something, show me a chart and a graph. And I'm 3/4 of the way there already, and I have to fight that urge. But for about a month or a month and a half, I was what I thought was born again, and I wasn't going to have sex until marriage, and I was keyed into some really important facts here that the rest of the people weren't, and I wasn't evangelical about it, but I was really intense about it, watching his show whenever it was on. And then those questions started coming back. I got a little bit older. The questions remained. And then I got to high school, Catholic school, really cool school. We went to church only for special days, like holy days of obligation and what have you.
Sure.
Mind you, elementary school, it was every weekday and then either Saturday or Sunday.
It's almost like when you're really little, we're going to tell you, 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 we're going to tell you. And then as they know that your ability to question things increases and your pushback increases, it becomes less and less often because now it's become a part of who you are. So it doesn't need every minute reinforcement. It needs a once a week reinforcement. And eventually it might only need a Christmas and Easter reinforcement for some people.
Sure. And you know, I wanted to be an altar boy. I thought it was fun to participate more, but I never really thought that I was getting closer to God. It was like my friends were altar boys. Right. I could pair up with my friends, and we could do something that was different. And you were, behind the scenes. How does the church work? But I got to high school, and all my friends. I imagine most of them are probably still Catholic. I would have to imagine that they are. But I became friends with people that would, say things to suggest that they didn't believe it. Of course, it's high school, so you're transgressive at that time.
Right. And I remember when I was in the Navy, there was a period when I got my dog tags renewed, and you would always have your religion on your dog tags. And when I first got my dog tags, they would say Southern Baptist. And at one point, I got my dog tags remade, and I had it put NRP on there, which stands for no religious preference. And that wasn't me in any way saying I'm a non-believer. It was, I was no longer active in any particular church. I wasn't convinced necessarily that I was still a Southern Baptist or a Baptist. I just wasn't sure where I fit. I wouldn't have called myself agnostic or an atheist. It was just like, I don't have a religious preference because I understand the dog tags are what to do when hey, what rites and ceremonies do you want performed? And I honestly did not give a damn.
Yeah.
It was like, when I'm dead, I'm dead. And I think I'm going to heaven and God's going to take care of me. So I don't care what you do with my body, which is one of the reasons I was so curious about the let's go take care of the dead. Yeah. Because in my view, as a Southern Baptist, Protestant, evangelical kid, the thing that's buried in the ground is just the sack that our souls inhabited. And when you get to heaven, you get a new body.
Yeah.
And so nothing, I understand, Jehovah's Witnesses won't donate blood. There are people who don't want to donate organs because they think this is the body that's going to, But my view of it was God's going to give you a new body, a perfect body. Why would you want this broken thing when you're in heaven?
I would think about, to talk about the beneath the ground, I would imagine what the bodies were like at that particular moment. My mind would wander in those avenues, like was it gel at that point? Was it a desiccated husk? I had heard about hermetically sealing, and so I know it's probably not perfectly sealed, but then I'd seen movies as a kid, like
what was going on? The Crypt Keeper?
Was
Did you wonder whether it looked like that?
Was it like the Crypt Keeper, or was it like one of the bad guys in RoboCop that gets all like toxic sludge and he's like gelatinous?
Or is it more like a mummified face? Yeah. It's interesting to think about those things. Now you're in high school, and the religious instruction or the forced religious instruction is kind of tapered off a bit to where it's not like daily.
I deliberately took extra religion classes because I was interested in that stuff. Comparative religions was the thing that I wanted to focus on.
You are kind of the above and beyond guy.
Sometimes,
I had a comparative religions course my sophomore year of high school, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until decades later how important that course was, and now I recommend it all the time. So what was you were interested in a comparative religion course, and you took one?
Yeah, I took one of those and learned a bit about different religions. I took a first to third century Gospels course with a teacher who got his PhD in theology, who was really interesting conversation in that class. And just kept on being interested in that stuff. And I found that my Catholic high school, it was an artsy school, so I was into arts and theater and stuff like that, and a little bit of track. And so I had a really well-rounded experience, and now to this day, if I lived back there, I would seriously consider sending a child, if I had one, to that school because it was such a good experience, and it wasn't preachy-talky. I had one religion professor or teacher who was really great guy, and my mother blames him for why I eventually became agnostic and then agnostic atheist. I don't know why. He didn't say anything that was particularly, again, transgressive, but there was, I guess, a trend in theology maybe in the 70s or 60s to explain the miracles in naturalistic ways.
Okay, yeah.
And he said, well, it wasn't that he miraculously generated loaves and fishes necessarily, but the message of Christ caused the people to bring out their loaves and fishes and share.
Ooh.
And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And
I'm getting ready to do a video, and I'm probably going to record it the next day or so, specifically on the loaves and fishes, because that story exists in a couple different Gospels and a couple different times. Like on one occasion, it's 5 loaves and 3 fishes. On another occasion, the numbers are slightly different. And I won't ruin what's coming up for that video because I want to do it. There's lots of problems with the story, but this teacher gave you a reasonable explanation for something, but that means that what happened wasn't at all miraculous in any sense, other than Jesus is an incredibly powerful figure that people were drawn to, that changed people's hearts. These people wanted to hoard their food, and he changed their hearts. I think that's a wonderful message and a wonderful way to do it. It's just not what the gospel actually says.
No. And again, it was like very conversational. There weren't a lot of, as far as scientific education at that time, I was intellectually lazy with regard to the sciences and math. I regret that now, because now I'm a bit older and I would have benefited from actually buckling down and being, an idiot a little bit less and work harder at math and science. But they didn't hide evolution or anything like that. It was very, I guess, middle of the road. There was nothing surprising about.
That's what I hear from Catholic schools, because I have a relative who went to a private Catholic school, and having talked to a bunch of Catholics, it's like Catholicism has for a long time not had a problem with evolution, and they generally in their private schools are very good about teaching the scientific facts and everything else, and maybe massaging explanations like the loaves and fishes or whatever. I can only assume what they would say about like walking on water or raising the dead, but you're in high school. It's a Catholic school, a private Catholic school, which is quite often a really great education. And matter of fact, if I had kids, the only thing that would keep me from sending kids to a private Catholic school is money, and a concern over whether or not they were going to be teaching things that would, in a way that would undermine. Right. Like, hey, we'll give you the sciences, we'll give you math, and we won't have any problem with evolution. But, Jesus is definitely, you must believe this in order to not go to hell type thing. And I don't know how much of that was there.
None. I mean, the whole notion of hell was it was in the background. It was more to be a good person. I remember hearing there are many paths to God. And there was no, you have to be Catholic. If you're going to be Catholic, you have to believe certain truths. And if you're not, you're something else. And that's fine.
Yeah, so let me put my Southern Baptist hat back on. Walking out of a Pentecostal church after a Carmen or Petra concert, to let you know that you are a Mary worshiping idolater who is bound for hell, and your wishy-washy Pope inspired new watered down message is going to lead you and every other Catholic directly to hell.
And maybe that's the reason why it was so mild, that it took so long for me to really engage with the atheism issue. Because, if I could continue, when I went to college, I was, in high school I wanted to be an artist, and I am, of sorts, for myself and for those who like the stuff that I do. But that's just a hobby, just for fun. I wanted to be a painter or an illustrator, or now I do ceramics, not as much as I like, but I didn't have any message. I didn't have an image that I wanted to develop into an art style. And so I thought, I never really considered, my girlfriend was going to this one college, and without even thinking, like a Bobo meathead, like, I'll just go to her college. So I did. And I was a theology major, which I thought was going to be the study of religions. But it was a Catholic college, so it was the study of the Catholic religion. And after one or two classes, and the first class was catechism class, detailed catechism. Like, this is not for me. But I was exposed at that time within the first semester to the notion of philosophy class.
Right.
And I was like, hey, this is way more what I'm after, right? I mean, a comparative mythology from an anthropological, sociological perspective, I could have done that. And it might have been fun if I had.
Not only that, but when you get into the philosophy stuff, the understanding that comes from philosophy could, hypothetically, have led anyone to the conclusion that, oh yeah, there is a religion that is, soundly supported by evidence that is logically consistent, and it happens to be Catholicism. And now I need to go back and study that stuff that I kind of blew off because I didn't have. Philosophy can serve as the grounding to show this. Unfortunately, for every religion I've come across, they are not supported by philosophy, especially when it comes to things like epistemology of how do we know what we know and is something reasonable. So you're in college. You're rudderless a bit, and you start studying philosophy. What happened with that? Because you're a lawyer.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a lot of lawyers were philosophy majors. Some of them
realized
were
they couldn't make
poli-sci.
any money in philosophy.
Can't make any money. I had this stupid pipe dream that I would become a philosophy professor, right?
Ooh.
No, not at the school that I went to, not with the level of attention that I put into it. But I would read a lot on my own that wasn't required in the courses. And so I remember sitting on the 5th floor of the library, the quietest floor because no one wanted to go up there, and I would read different philosophy books, different novels, different things, just for fun. And I was a history of philosophy specialty, so it was ancient stuff. And of course, but I had to take a sampling all the way through the basic courses. 19th century German ideological philosophy was the one that broke my brain. I took Hegelian philosophy, Marx and Marxism. I took, of course, Plato and Aristotle, metaphysics class, all that stuff. And as time went on, I started thinking, well, I definitely am an agnostic. An agnostic what? I thought that just meant I was undecided. And so I made friends who generally kind of seemed to agree with what I did. And then I made another friend who did debates. And he belonged to an atheist meetup, kind of a group, way long before there was meetup. And he would do debates, he would do pub conversations and stuff like that. He published a little book. I'm now in communication with him again after a while. I'm like, hey, are you going to tune into AXP this week kind of thing? And I thought he was way over the top. I'm like, why do you care so much? Let these people do their thing. We've heard that on the show a lot.
I get it almost every day.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you'll hear the story that religion is several blind people trying to describe an elephant, and that's why you get different things. That kind of anecdote could apply to anything, because what happens when people watch the Atheist Experience is they walk in with whatever baggage they have and whatever preconceptions they have, and if they see a conversation and they see it get heated, either I'm an angry person who got heated, or the other person was so obstinate and frustrating that it was unavoidable. When the truth is, I'm responsible for how I react, and that person is responsible for what they do. And if there's a problem with the communication, there have been times where I will get an email from one person saying, you have the patience of a saint. Somebody else says, you are an impatient ass. And the person I was actually on the phone with has also decided to email, and we will be having a conversation, and neither of us feels that the other is an idiot or angry or whatever. Yeah. And if we just understood that we're all walking in to assess these things with some baggage, and that just because we feel a certain way doesn't mean that's accurate, and And so you're talking about pretty much the same thing. Here's a friend of yours who you thought was over the top. Now you're messaging about the Atheist Experience. Please tell me he thinks you're over the top now.
I haven't asked him.
Okay.
I don't even know if you watched.
Because that would be fun.
That would be funny. Yeah, and so he wrote a book about biblical contradictions. And his story was, he was in a seminary of sorts, and they gave him the assignment of finding 1 or 2 or 3 biblical contradictions. Bring them to class. So he did. And the instructor gave him pat answers. And he's like, okay, that's not a very good answer. So he started collecting them, and he collected so many, and he just decided that this wasn't for him. He deconverted himself by going to the seminary.
That's kind of what happened to me, only not with regard to contradictions. As a matter of fact, claims of contradictions in Scripture have never had much weight. It can never carry much weight with me, but we can get into that another time.
Sure. And maybe there was more to it, but that's what I remember him telling me. And so I remember sharing the book with a friend of mine that was dating a Pentecostal, a dear friend of mine. Well, here's my friend's book. Read this. I don't think she ever did. And now I wish I had a copy of that book because I'd like to compare it with the stuff that I've read since then. And so around this time, I started thinking, well, I guess I'm an atheist because I don't believe that this stuff exists. And I think I was a little stronger. I think I probably thought, the divine hiddenness argument has sort of been in my mind nascently, like, well, why is it so hard to find God?
Yeah.
Maybe because the world looks like there isn't one. And as the years went on, I started becoming more sort of background, like, I'm an atheist. And then, the algorithm led me to the Atheist Experience on YouTube, clicking things. And I was watching the Atheist Experience for maybe 6 months. And I heard you or one of the other hosts say, well, after the show, we're going to have dinner at the Star of India and over on Anderson Lane. And I was like, after 6 months, I looked at the banner and heard Star of India. I'm like, oh, I've been to Star of India. I was there for someone's birthday. What the hell? They're in Austin?
It is something that happens quite often. People are like, I watched the show for a long time before I realized you were in Austin. And I'll do this for the sake of the people who don't remember. I've hosted the show for 15 years. Let me go back in time 13 years. Boy, it's kind of hard to do, but welcome to the Atheist Experience. This is a live call-in program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, located in Austin, Texas. And after dinner, we go and do this. And if any atheist or atheist-friendly person, but we would actually say Austin, and then it just became like, well, everybody knows we're in Austin. And there's literally, we were doing a renovation on the building after the toilet catastrophe of 2019.
Yep.
Guy who lived less than a mile from the building walked down to the building, saw the Free Thought Library sign, walked in, and said he had no idea that there was an atheist community in the Austin area at all, and he lived less than a mile from the building, where there's a big sign that says Atheist Community of Austin, Free Thought Library.
Yeah.
It's strange.
And I passed the building many times because I had business up, to do stuff up there. So then I showed up, and actually I went to dinner first, met a bunch of people, met Jamie.
We were still going out to dinner then.
Still going out to dinner, met Jamie, and Jamie Boone of Talk Heathen fame, and we had a good time, and I started going a little bit more. Sometime after that, ended up meeting you and hitting it off, and then went away for a while. I had things going on, and then my friends, good friends that I have, we were kind of getting into a rut as to what we were doing. Right. So I want to do more stuff. I want to do more philosophy stuff. I had looked up Meetup and saw that there was a philosophy under the influence at the ACA. I'm like, that is my bag. So I went down there and attended and tried to keep my mouth shut because I'm a talker and I talk for a living and mostly write for a living, quite honestly. And had good conversations, met some cool people, reacquainted myself with you because I had been gone, and then we started going more regularly.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't normally attend the philosophy under the influence for the same reason you sat there quietly. It's because I recognize that while I'm not claiming to have any expertise, for people showing up on a Wednesday night for philosophy under the influence, if I'm seated there and we've decided here's the moral dilemma or here's the philosophical subject we're going to talk about tonight, even if everybody's afforded an opportunity to say something, if I talk, I might say the thing that closes the door to all the rest of the conversation.
Yeah.
Like nobody's going to challenge this or nobody's going to challenge me.
Yeah.
And whether it's because it's me or whether it's because I'm more familiar with the topic and like,
Sure.
Here, let's open to the back of the book and see what the solution to the crossword puzzle is. It stifles conversation. And I'm like, no, everybody who's showing up there have their time doing this.
Yeah, there's a danger of you occupying the field, so there's no room to maneuver.
I get plenty of time to talk.
Yeah.
I don't need to go into areas where other people are trying to talk and learn stuff and go, I'm here and I have the answer.
Sure.
When the fact is, I probably don't.
No.
For a lot of things, it's just too complicated. So you got more involved with the ACA. What was the first show that you did?
First show I did was the Atheist Vanguard, or it was the nonprofits.
Yeah.
It might have been the nonprofits, but well, either way, that was a good experience. I had never been. I mean, I've been recorded a bunch of times. I've done tons of public speaking. I've done a bunch of trials. That's not a surprise for me. And so the producers were really good about prepping me and giving me really good advice that I will admit I learned, years ago in law school and in my practice. But it's good to rehear it.
And they're not used to having anybody come in with the sort of background that you would have in preparation and public speaking and how to avoid dead air. It's one of the reasons, when I added Jenna as co-host for Atheist Experience, it's because she came in and did an episode of Nonprofits. And there were three people in the room, and Jenna's there on her first one ever, and she's sitting there. And every time everybody else would stop talking and there was going to be dead air, she instinctively started to fill it and asked a question and directed stuff. And I was like, that's what you're looking for. By the way, for all the people who are watching, we're going to continue this discussion with a little bit more about courtrooms and burden of proof and that kind of stuff. But we get email on a regular basis, the Atheist Community of Austin does, about how do I get involved with the show? How can I be a co-host on the Atheist Experience? And the answer is really simple and not particularly fair, and that is you should probably be in Austin. You can be a guest no matter where you are, but by and large, if we're going to have a regular host or co-host, I want somebody who's in Austin. And then the second part of that is you need to be at the ACA participating so that people get to know you and get comfortable with you. I'm not going to even try somebody out as a co-host if I haven't had time to talk to them. And that's true. So Jenna, I adore all the people who are co-hosting right now. Don Baker's been on there longer than I have, and I love Don. Jenna was an immediate easy add. Jim and Shane, both great at what they do. And then having you on now is kind of like a trial thing. Lets me know that when we need to shift things around, like I can call you anytime. Like right now, you're staying with me, so it's really easy. But I could call you anytime and say, "Hey, we need somebody to fill in on AXP," and you're already ready. It's not just about, "Ooh, I know something," or "I like to have these discussions," or "I'm the best debater in the history of debatiness." It is in fact a TV show, and you have to be comfortable just talking and making sure that you don't do that, the dead air.
Sure. I mean, there is a necessity. Do you know the guitar god Michelangelo?
No.
Yeah, a friend of mine. I used to do some theater, and he was like, "Check out this guy Michelangelo," and he's one of these guitar wizards, right? Sure. And I remember he had so many notes, right? Like Archduke, whatever his name was, Franz Joseph from Amadeus. Too many notes. And I remember saying to him, "Yeah, but it's not just the notes you play, but it's the spaces between the notes for you to be able to appreciate it." And sometimes you want to ask a question and just let the silence sink in. But that's different from just being stunned at maybe the direction the conversation's going.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation with somebody else the other day. By the way, Philip DeFranco produces some great informative content. I don't know him personally. I'm not going to trash talk him. But there's something about the delivery in his videos and in other videos where it's almost a monotone delivery, and then they edit out any spaces. Let me, like if I were to talk and then start talking again, that would have been, if I were to talk and then start talking again, there's no breathing. My favorite guitarists are like David Gilmour, Mark Knopfler. And it's primarily because they make really good use of space. You listen to like a solo from Comfortably Numb or Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, and it's, here's a couple notes, and this one I'm going to let hang there for a while, and then it's going to be silent, because that builds the anticipation, and then all of a sudden when that next note hits, it's like a euphoric thing. if you were just going dun 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 do do do. Oh wait, that's 9 to 5, which is not a bad song either. But
Yeah, but allowing there to be a space that you can occupy mentally, let your brain work, because it's not just hot takes.
yeah,
There's deep amounts of thinking that need to take place for you to get where you need to go. The brain is not a flash drive. It's not instantaneous.
and by the way, the space doesn't have to be dead air. The space could be a joke aside. Like I said something important and I toss a joke on the end, because your brain doesn't have to work on the joke, and your brain can work on the thing that was said that was important. And it's, there is skill in public speaking, there's skill in presentation. I've said before that debates are a lot of theater. We're gonna wrap this up here in just a second and get on to another topic.
We could do this all day, I'm sure.
And have and will. As a teaser for the next thing, I would argue that what happens on the Atheist Experience, and I'm not just drawing on TV courtrooms, is far closer to lawyering, having a witness that you're asking questions of and trying to direct the conversation in a certain way, and that while bias can enter into it on all sides, that when it's done right in pursuit of the truth, we're engaged in and maybe I am stealing too much from TV, but it seems a lot like how I would imagine, on occasion, like if somebody calls in and be like, I just want to say, objection, non-responsive, Your Honor, I'd like permission to treat the caller as a hostile witness. I mean, because that's the way my brain works.
Yeah.
And you fit in so easily right off the bat that I'm wondering if you kind of see it the same way, or if maybe this is just me as a non-lawyer pretending to be Perry Mason or something.
This might be a controversial response, although I don't think anyone that thinks about it for a while will disagree with me. But unlike the sciences, which I believe are the pursuit of true facts about the universe, medicine, you can't bullshit a disease, right? I think that while the law is about justice, the practice of law is about winning. And I'm not, when I'm up on the stand, not on the stand, when I'm behind the podium directing or cross-examining a witness, making an argument, there are rules that I have to follow, but I'm not seeking the truth. I'm seeking victory within the bounds of the rules of the court and ethical rules. The process is designed to lead to justice. But if I were after the truth, I would be also making my opponent's case as well.
Right.
And I don't do that. And that's malpractice. It's up to the other side to do that. So with the show, I think there's more of an attempt to get at the truth than there is in a courtroom analogy.
That's fair. How did you enjoy your first episode of Atheist Experience, and do you want to do more of it?
I enjoyed it. When I got off the show, I thought, oh, I did a terrible job. And then I went away and then I watched it and watched the comments, the live comments, just to see what was being said. Apparently this was a hot topic more than anything else, which I'm not going to say what it is. Let the mystery brew.
You can go Google your own stuff then.
Yeah, it's real and it's not illegal. That's all I'm going to say.
You're not. Johnny's not sitting here getting high through all this.
No, it's water, not fire or whatever. But it gave me some things to improve upon. I'm always looking for ways to improve everything I do, whether or not I see that there's a deficiency. Yeah. But then I watched it again and I thought, oh, that was okay. I'd love to do it again.
Yeah. It's almost certainly going to happen. I want to wrap this up here because we've got another video to do. Thank you for being here, since you're currently living here, but thank you for doing this. Mm-hmm. I have every intention of getting you on the show more often as our schedules and locations and stuff permit. For those of you who haven't seen it, go back and watch last week's episode of the Atheist Experience. Although if you're watching this 3 years from now, obviously it won't be last week's. No. It'll be the May 24th? May 24th, 2020. Is when Johnny was on there with me. I'm sure you'll be seeing more of him because when he might left the show thinking, oh, I didn't do so good, and I left the show going, wow, that was smooth as butter, and I couldn't have asked for somebody else to just jump in and have a great first show. But by all means, let us know what you think down in the comments, and go over to the Atheist Experience show, watch that, leave some good comments there as well. And we'll see you next time with more information from an actual lawyer on the burden of proof and the nature of claims. See you next time. Bye-bye.
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.